Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of our sister show, All Things Considered.
The show where we consider all things as opposed to just looking at a single classic for your consideration.
If you've never heard one of the All Things Considered episodes before, basically Dustin and I each pick two movies. Could be any movie, doesn't have to be a classic. It's just something that we've seen recently and would like to either just bring attention to or discuss, and we take turns doing so.
Anywho, this time to get things started, I'm actually going to put you in the hot seat and say, Mike, what's your first?
Well, originally I was going to talk about The Girl with All the Gifts that came out last year, but then I realized I actually wrote a review of it for the blog. It was one of the Afterthoughts columns, and I thought I would... Well, first off, I replaced that movie with another one, and secondly, I thought I would take this opportunity just to let everybody know, if you aren't already aware of the For Your Consideration blog on WordPress, we have a blog. The address is fycshow.wordpress.com. We post little essays, reviews. We have a feature called Consider This for films that we think most people have a bad impression of, and we think that people need to reconsider them. And we've recently decided to sort of nail down a tentative schedule for the show, which was 2 episodes a month. And we then decided that we were going to alternate the episodes with a blog post. So Dustin's going to be writing some stuff. I'm going to be writing some stuff. So you'll get, first week is a regular FYC episode. Next week will be a new blog post. Next week will be an episode. Next week is a blog post. It's pretty simple.
We hope so anyway. We'll do our best to keep up with the schedule, the hectic schedule.
Now, having said that, and done the requisite amount of self-promotion, sorry, my voice is... Need to take a beverage here.
That's staying in, by the way, so you can all hear it.
Now, having done the requisite amount of self-promotion here, I'll jump into my first movie, which is Ghostbusters, Answer the Call.
Are you the Ghostbusters? Guilty as charged.
We see things no one else is willing to see.
You saw a ghost,
yeah.
Like that movie with Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, he was behind me and we made a vase.
We do things others can't do. Now there's sightings all over the city.
We might be the only ones who can stop it.
Time to catch a ghost! So I don't know if it was a race thing or a lady thing, but I'm mad as hell.
That was the full title of it?
That was actually the full title of it. I recently listened to the audio commentary for it as well, and the director said it was called Answer the Call because when distributors were looking at it in catalogs, they didn't want it to be confused with the original Ghostbusters by just having Ghostbusters, and they didn't want to call it Ghostbusters 2016 because then it looks like Airport 77, and then it's like no longer relevant a year later. So they called it Ghostbusters Answer the Call.
That doesn't explain all the other movies, which aren't getting mixed up with the originals, though. They had to be special, I guess.
This was a Sony thing. They also said that most of the Asian countries thought the movie was called Ghost Corps because there's a company called Ghost Corps that was put together to like represent Ghostbusters franchise property, and there's like a logo that comes up at the beginning of the movie. So they think that's the name of the movie. Anyways, Ghostbusters Answer the Call came out in 2016. It was directed by Paul Feig. And it was an interesting movie in the respect that it had about a full year of hate and loathing heaped upon it.
Before it even came out. Like a Star Wars prequel, there was no way that I could live up to the expectation, whether that was a positive or negative expectation. I found this movie was very middle of the road. As a very, very big Ghostbusters fan myself, there were things about it I really enjoyed. There were things about it that I thought were very middle of the road. There's nothing I outright hated. But yeah, I don't think this movie was an excellent movie, but I also don't think this movie deserved even a fraction of the negativity that it got. And honestly, it's kind of unfortunate that it probably will not get a sequel, because I think a second movie might have been unencumbered by the whole origin story stuff and the setting up of stuff, and they could have just gotten into... This is going to be a spoilery episode. There's an after-credit sequence where Leslie Jones's character is listening to some audio tape, listening for... Is it EVP? EPV? The ghost voices that you record? Honestly, I don't know. This is where we need Kat. She would know this.
I think it's EVP or EPV. But yeah, she's listening to it, and she's like, hey guys, what's Zool? And anybody who's watched the original 84 Ghostbusters knows that Zool was the bad guy from that movie. So, could have been cool.
And also, people would have gotten over the fact that it's women instead of men, and they could have calmed their shit with the sexism and the bigotry.
Yeah, and I honestly, when it was announced, I mean, I was excited. I was happy to see an all-female cast. I would have been happy to see an all-goat cast. I mean, I'm a Ghostbusters fan. And
at the end of the day, the gender of the characters was completely irrelevant. It had nothing to do with anything.
If I had anything to say about kind of original cast, new cast, I'm just sad that I didn't get to see Winston, Ray, Peter, and Egon have one more adventure. But we wouldn't have gotten that anyways because Harold Ramis is dead. So
if you want those adventures, we've got how many different TV series, maybe comics, video games you could play?
Yeah, honestly, the Ghostbusters video game that came out a few years ago, that is Ghostbusters 3. It's written by Aykroyd and Ramis, stars all the voice actors except Rick Moranis, and it's a great story that brings in stuff from the past, brings in new stuff. It's well worth playing just to sort of get that part of the story. But back to the movie, the four leads were pretty good. I did get a little tired of Melissa McCarthy and Kristen Wiig doing their little back and forth, glass half empty, glass half full.
You were saying earlier that, yeah, that was the big problem with the movie you had, where it was too sitcom-y as opposed to let's actually drive the plot forward with stuff.
Definitely more joke-focused, but that's not a surprise coming from Paul Feig, because Paul Feig, he likes to shoot a lot of material of people just sort of doing their thing, and then they go to the editing room and they pick what they think is good. And Paul Feig might be of note to you because he was the director of Spy, which was one of your favorite movies, I believe, in the year-end roundup.
That or it was going to be. Either way, it was a movie that definitely surprised me and one that I enjoyed, but one that is not featured on this episode.
Leslie Jones was the one character that I didn't actually... I'm not a fan of Leslie Jones's comedy, and so going into the movie, I was like, I wish they cast anybody but Leslie Jones in that role. But honestly, coming out of that movie, Kate McKinnon's Holtzman and Leslie Jones's character, I really enjoyed them. I thought they were kind of the most entertaining Ghostbusters there, so kind of balanced out some of the shortcomings in the McCarthy Wiig characters. A lot of really great secondary characters. Some people will probably talk about the cameos. I wasn't a huge fan of the cameos because after a while you start ticking off the boxes. You're like, okay, Bill Murray's there. Okay, Dan Aykroyd's there. And then you're like, okay, where's Sigourney Weaver?
That's pretty much expected, though.
Where's Eddie Hudson? Ernie Hudson, sorry. So, not my favorite part of the movie, but it was kind of nice to see those characters or those actors sort of return. Yeah, I mean, there's some genuine funny moments. One of the best moments when Chris Hemsworth character, he refers to an aquarium as a submarine for fish. Had to pause the movie there for taking a laughter break. But yeah, it's like I said, it's middle of the road for me. I definitely recommend seeing it. It's entertaining.
Middle of the road. What a sparkling review.
A little lighter on plot than I would have liked. A little heavier on jokes than I would have liked. But it does some things that the original Ghostbusters... You know, I saw the original Ghostbusters for its 30th anniversary in the theaters. Probably haven't seen it in the theater since I originally went to see it in 84. And I was kind of surprised at how clunky it can be in parts where it just sort of takes the leap. You know, there's that first ghost experience, and then there's a montage, and then it's like, oh, hey, we've been hunting ghosts for a while. And the new Ghostbusters, it actually does a better job of sort of easing the characters into it, and it feels a little bit more natural, and the big ghost outbreak is kind of at the end of the film, and I really like that slow burn more than sort of the original 84 version. On the other hand, the original 84 version, better costumes. Personally, I thought there were better jokes, and they've only got the one set of proton packs, and in the new film, Kate McKinnon's character is coming up with like 3 different types of weapons or gadgets every 15 minutes, which could be for selling toys. I don't know. But it gets a little distracting after a while because... Sounds
like it'll be good upgrades for a video game.
Totally. But
But yeah, it's nice to have the Lady Ghostbusters out there. I've got really nothing else to say.
The sparkling middle of the road review.
Well,
But no. I agree entirely that to sort of counter the negative stigma that it got for really no reason, you should see it to get your own opinion of the movie and not compare it to the original. And expectations being a big thing. I actually intend on writing on that next.
And it's not a bad movie. Like I would say it's a good movie. It's just
not a great movie, not a bad movie.
It's kind of a hopeless endeavor. Like you're just never going to be able to make a Ghostbusters movie
that people are not going to freak out about.
Even the guys who made the original Ghostbusters movie couldn't make another Ghostbusters movie that everybody loved. Ghostbusters 2 is not well liked. I'm a big fan of it myself because I think even though the plots may be a little bit shaky, there are some amazing character moments in that movie. But yeah, like Ghostbusters 2 it's not as fun as the first. And if the original guys can't do it, you shouldn't expect anybody else to do it.
A lot of movies are like that, and that a sequel will never live up. A remake will never live up. So sometimes it's best to avoid it or do a complete different type of movie when you do the remake.
Although I'm sure there's some people out there who are like, give it to J.J. Abrams.
We need some lens flare. That'll help.
So we'll close down the Ghostbusters conversation there, and I will pass off the baton to Dustin for his first film.
For my first film, we've got the Japanese Not At All a Classic from 2003, directed by Yūdai Yamaguchi, Battlefield Baseball.
野球に一番大切なのはチームワークだ。すなわち友情だ。
This movie is batshit nuts. There's one thing that I've found, it seems to be a subgenre in Japan where it's just, this is the most ridiculous stuff you've ever seen, and it just keeps going and getting dumber and dumber throughout the whole movie, and it's fantastic. I've seen a number of movies like this, and it's great. The premise of this movie is that there's a baseball team from just a regular school that wants to go to... Oh, shit. I got to remember this because that's important. They got to go to Koshien Stadium where they can win the cup, win the tournament, win the trophy, get the prize. But there's another baseball team from Ghetto which apparently just flat out kills everybody for no reason and gets away with it just because. It's absolutely ridiculous. The principal of the school had faced Ghetto before and lost the entire baseball team, and he just wants to give up, but Ghetto doesn't allow them to. And it just turns into a big thing. They find a superstar, Jubei Baseball, who's a rebel and a punk who manages to be the best baseball player ever. He has all the stuff that you need, so they're hoping he'll save the team. People change their bodies because they change their mind. The special effects are dumb. He killed his dad in a terrible baseball accident, which is why he ran away from home. He meets his brother but doesn't recognize him because I guess... People just appear out of nowhere, applauding everything. It's ridiculous.
So what genre is this movie?
It is technically a sports comedy, but the thing is, if you're paying attention, it actually follows a lot of the tropes of a regular baseball movie or a regular sports film. Any sort of thing like the Mighty Ducks,
Major League,
it all follows the exact same tropes, only it's done to weird, ridiculous extremes that make no sense. And one of the dumbest things that'll happen in the movie that I definitely noticed when I first saw it was the whole time they're talking about this pitch that he used to kill his dad and how he's going to have to use this special pitch that he'd forgotten how to do in order to win the game. They never actually really play a game. He never uses the pitch at any point. He comes back from the dead so that a specter of his dad could tell it to him. He never uses it. But everyone learns the meaning of friendship in the end, which is... sort of like most of these sports team kind of movies, right?
So there is like a violent battle royale sort of
Oh yeah, everybody
element to
dies.
it?
Literally everybody dies until he cries, and a single tear from Jubei Baseball revives everyone, and then it's a big applaud for everything. Everyone learns meaning of friendship.
And there's like
It's
a
great.
sports fantasy sci-fi element to it. Like it's a little bit of everything.
Not at all. It is pure sports and ridiculousness. I'll admit, like, the ghetto baseball team is pretty much weird like zombie submissives with a crazy killer coach, and eventually half the regular team are cyborgs because they're killed and they come back. But the thing that ties the entire movie together, that makes the whole thing brilliant in my mind, there's a dog and a drunk guy who appear throughout the movie. And the drunk guy just shouts out some random nonsense. The dog's just sitting there, and they follow them all over the country. But at the very end of the movie, there's a narration going on, talking about, you know, everything that's going on, how everyone's got together, but how nobody noticed that outside this whole thing, somebody died. This old man died of alcohol poisoning with a smile on his face, and I was his pet dog. And could you ever hope to die as happy as this drunk old guy? The entire thing is basically a sports movie as told from the perspective of a dog. So they don't understand what's going on. They're making shit up. Stuff seems super ridiculous to them. And it all suddenly makes sense.
So is this like a typical crazy Japanese movie, or is this still a little out of left field? No pun intended.
Honestly, it's hard to say what would be out of left field in these crazy Japanese movies. Like, I've seen something like Tokyo Gore Police, where the entire plot becomes explained by the villain via picture slideshow. It's ridiculous, and it's awesome. If you enjoy movies that are just sort of, yes, out of left field, that are ridiculous and that are absurdist, this is definitely the kind of movie you would enjoy.
So how did you find this movie, and where would somebody who wants to see it find it?
I initially found it reading cracked articles about utterly ridiculous movies, and I saw the trailer for it, and I was sold. I had to see it. I saw it with a group of friends. I've shown it to other people. You might be able to find, actually, the whole thing on YouTube even, but they'd probably take it down. Honestly, any foreign film is usually rather tricky to find, especially one that's probably a little more not well known, not as popular.
But you say this is definitely worth the effort of hunting it down.
If you are a fan of ridiculous, crazy movies, this is one that'll have you laughing. It is great in how terrible it is.
Well, that was certainly much better than my middle of the road review.
And what would you have for your next one that is possibly a little left of center?
My next movie, pretty much I'm giving it highest possible recommendation I could give anything. It's a movie that I've wanted to see for a long time, actually. It's a 2008 film by director Ari Folman, and it's called Waltz with Bashir.
Look, after the 1982 invasion of Lebanon, I lost my memory. Now, in order to remember, I'm looking for those who can never forget.
The film is essentially, it's an animated film, but it's a documentary, biography, a historical account. It's a sobering story about one man trying to reconstruct his memory from the 1982 Lebanon War. He was a member of the Israeli Defense Force, and this man is Ari Folman. This is a true account of his own experience. During the Lebanon War, there was a massacre that happened in the Sabra and Shatila camps at the hands of Christian Phalangist militia. You learn at the very beginning that Ari's character, he's talking to a friend who has started having flashbacks after 20 years, and talking about this man's flashbacks to the war has now sparked a particular flashback in Ari, and he's trying to find kind of the meaning to it because it's an event he doesn't remember, and when he kind of thinks about his time in the war, there's a lot that he can't remember. He gets encouraged by one of his friends to seek out other people that were there. There was one person in his dream whom he was encouraged to go and talk to, find out what he knows, if he can fill in any of the blanks. Folman eventually, it kind of starts as this personal journey, and then it becomes personal journey and documentary because he brings in sort of outside sources. There's a psychologist, there's a war correspondent who was very well known at the time and was the first person to cover or uncover this massacre. And it's amazing how it unfolds. The animation is ultimately a series of cutout backgrounds with flash animated characters. There's a little bit of traditional animation in it, very, very little bit. It blends in a little bit of real news footage as well. There's only about like a minute of it. Although I will say that having watched that minute of news footage, it was a remarkably, extraordinarily sobering experience. The movie just really moved me, and it did what I think any good documentary should do, which is not only engage, but I sought out more information on the events. Even though I was alive at the time, I mean, I've studied a little bit of the history, the Israelis and the Palestinians and the West Bank, but there was still kind of stuff that I didn't know, and I really wasn't sure how they were going to be attacking it. And I think he took the right course, which was just making it a personal story. It really didn't have a lot of politics to it. It was a very human story. Yeah, it just blew me away. It's a truly extraordinary film. I could not recommend it high enough. I think I talked to you while I was watching it, and I said that, you know, any of the shortcomings with sort of the format, the animation that they chose, was just completely overshadowed by the subject matter itself. It almost didn't matter I say it almost didn't matter how they chose to present the information, but I think it did. I think the fact that it was animated probably made it easier to watch, and I think it made it easier for him because there are flashbacks and there are some dream sequences, so it gave the filmmakers some creative license.
They sort of switched around the art style a little bit depending on the flashback and whatnot?
Not really the art style, just there's moments that happened in memory that didn't happen in life. And that's kind of the whole point of the movie, right? Is he's reconstructing these moments. Since he's
reconstructing these moments, is it happening not necessarily in chronological order? Like they'll jump back and forth a little bit?
A little bit. It's mostly a linear story. He's kind of, every person he talks to sort of talks about a different experience during the war. And as he's learning and remembering, like there's one instance where he's talking to somebody and he's telling him a story where they were attacked by a kid with an RPG in an orchard. Ari says, "Was I there?" And the guy he's talking to is like, "Yeah, you were totally there." And he's like, "Are you sure? You're not just remembering that, thinking out?" He's like, "No, dude, you were there. You were totally there. I remember seeing you there. You were in every engagement that I was in." And Ari had no memory of this. Whereas this guy had absolute memory of Ari being in all of these places. And as he was hearing about these experiences, whether he was actually involved in them or not, I think just hearing about the conflict and hearing about the situations was jogging memories in his mind.
Or at the very least, creating memories. Created memories, manufactured memories, falsely remembered memories. That's huge things. And certainly, given the subject matter, probably would lead to PTSD, regardless of whether or not he was there.
And they did actually discuss that, because there's a moment where, so the flashback that he has, the friend who was in the flashback says that he wasn't there, so there's a question as to whether it was real or representative. That's sort of part of the journey where he's taking this memory and figuring out what the memory means, because the memory does represent other things. And by the end of the film, you sort of see the true memory. He does manage to put it together, and he was apparently in the vicinity when this massacre happened, and it was something that he had basically completely shut out of his memory. And yeah, it's, like I said, extremely well told. It's a super sobering story. Actually, interestingly, surprisingly relevant considering everything that's going on in Syria right now, and just an extraordinary movie experience. Like my highest recommendation to anybody, this is watch Waltz with Bashir.
And to bring us back to a bit more levity, given the subject matter there, since I do like to theme my choices a little bit at the very least. And this one is the 1989 movie directed by Peter Jackson, Meet the Feebles.
From the director of Bad Taste.
Yippee!
You realize you were sitting on its face?
Well, I felt a bit uncomfortable, but I thought it was my hemorrhoid.
Please, God, I know I've been a bad bunny, but if you
Nothing
make me well again...
is sacred.
Meet the Feebles! Meet the Feebles! They're not your average, ordinary people. Meet the Feebles!
Meet the Feebles is about to be released on you.
Have you ever noticed the beautiful lighting in this toilet?
I believe we mentioned this in the Lord of the Rings episode.
We did.
Much to Kat's chagrin. She was less of a fan of the movie, though I think she did enjoy the movie somewhat. It is...
But Kat's not here.
She is not here. This movie is another completely ridiculous movie. The premise is perfectly reasonable. What you have is a family variety hour show where there's a lot of dealings that are skeezy and under the table going on behind it. The director is hooking up with the main star who was underage at the beginning, but now he's cheating on her and doesn't quite care for her anymore. At the same time, he's also dealing drugs with some organized crime going on in the background. There's dungeon porn being filmed in the basement of the studio. There's...
Of course there is.
There's a perfectly innocent guy who comes in who's your male lead in this kind of movie of seedy underworlds. He falls in love with one of the characters who gets involved in some stuff later on, which is a little skeezy, but not her choice. So there's a bit of a misunderstanding. You could honestly consider it a bit of a romance in that sense, because it follows a lot of those tropes. You have other cheatings and goings-on throughout the film, and after all of this happens is the famous massacre scene where the lead actress has a complete mental breakdown, snaps, and kills everyone. Pulls out an M4 and just destroys the entire thing. Which, spoilers by the way, there's a few survivors of course, but the thing that usually makes something like that could be a perfectly reasonable movie, but it's done with Muppets and big animal costumes. So immediately everything seems just that extra bit more ridiculous. We're used to seeing Muppets and puppets done in a much more jovial, sort of child-friendly fashion. For those of you who've seen The Dark Crystal, you might have a bit of an inkling as to what puppets can do in the more dark sense, and this is definitely a dark comedy. You will see some stuff that you never thought you would see, and it is definitely amusing.
Well, most of Peter Jackson's early stuff is of a darker tone. I don't think it was until... I think anything after the Frighteners. Anything before the Frighteners and before, that's all.
Well, Forgotten Silver was a comedy parody of, it was sort of a mockumentary, and definitely not a dark tone at all. But yeah, Heavenly Creatures, Bad Taste, Dead Alive, Meet the Feebles, all pretty dark movies. Honestly, I'd consider Peter Jackson's early films to be splatter comedies, is what I would call them. Lots of murder, lots of death, but also fairly ridiculous and pretty amusing, every single one of them.
I remember thinking when he was announced as being the guy to do The Lord of the Rings, I felt that it was a good fit, but I wondered sort of how charming they would end up being, because everything that I'd seen from him up to that point was always a little bit dark.
Which ones had you seen by that point? I know you said you haven't seen Meet the Feebles.
I'd seen Dead Alive, I'd seen Heavenly Creatures, I'd seen Frighteners. I think that was it.
And as for myself, I'd actually seen everything he'd done up to that point. And I was like, really? you're getting the guy that did Meet the Feebles and Bad Taste. You're asking him. Really?
But you knew he was good with effects.
Oh, absolutely. Practical effects has been Peter Jackson's thing since the beginning.
And even like the practical effects and the digital and the combination of the two, like seeing Dead Alive and seeing The Frighteners, I mean, I knew the guy could tell a story. I knew the guy could deal with effects. I knew he could deal with makeup. I just wasn't sure sort of how he would bring all of that into Lord of the Rings. Wolverine oranges.
Tangerine.
And the Lord of the Rings ended up coming out in a very heartwarming sort of way. Like it has some darkness to it, but it's quite charming.
He also throws in his patented sort of little comedy off to the side where no matter what situation you're in, you can always throw in a bit of a laugh. And that's something I've certainly appreciated about him. But if you like sort of off-the-wall comedies, once again, this is another one that is good. Good in its badness. It's not going to win any awards, but it is something that will amuse if you can put up with that kind of movie. And that is pretty much my theme for today. If you can put up with dumb shit, this is stuff that is for you. The one thing I do want to do is I do want to try to get us together to do an audio commentary on this movie. Because as we said before, we want to do more audio commentaries as well.
The hope is to do another commentary.
And I am pushing for Meet the Feebles.
So to do the roundup of our 4 films here, Ghostbusters, Answer the Call. I still cringe every time I say that.
It doesn't sound right. I'm going to be the 50 millionth person to say that. It doesn't sound right.
And not a choice of the filmmakers. That's a complete marketing thing. So Ghostbusters 2016, good movie, not exceptional.
Battlefield Baseball, ridiculous movie. It's hard to call it good. It's good bad. It's good bad. It is a good bad movie.
Waltz with Bashir, extraordinary film, possibly a transformative experience.
And Meet the Feebles, another good bad movie.
So that wraps it up for this episode of All Things Considered. Thanks again for joining us. If there's a movie that you would actually like us to do on the show, feel free to send in some suggestions. You can contact us on our Facebook page or through Twitter, where we're at FYC Show.
Just tie it to the leg of a pigeon, set it free to the air. We will find a way.
Either us or Mike Tyson will get that message.
Send it with a message for him to send it to us. The mystery is, what do we think of that movie?
And if you like the show, feel free to follow us on all of our social media. Tell your friends. If you get the show from iTunes, while you're there, takes no time. We'd appreciate it if you rated the show, review the show if you don't mind. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Anything positive helps with us in the podcasting standings there and getting the show out to people who may not know about us yet.
And anything negative might tell us where we're being dumb, where we're failing, and how to improve. Constructive criticism. We hope to see you around next time, even though we never see you, and podcasts don't have any visual media whatsoever.
Which may be to their benefit.
Ow.
Take care, and we'll see you again next time.
Until next time.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Dustin. Ta-ta.
Take care.
So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. That wasn't awkward at all.